It's time for Cutting Edge Consciousness with Freeman Michaels and Barnett Bain. Thought-provoking discussions and bold ideas from the edge of possibility.
And we are back on Cutting Edge Consciousness. This is Barnett Bain with my co-host Freeman Michaels. Freeman, you have been itching to bring something into this conversation, and we've been laughing about it during the break. We promised each other we would go to the Moken in the third. For our listeners, what we're referring to, of course, is the third segment of our show. And
what are we referring to?
Pertinent to that incredible conversation that we had with Tom
goodness.
Shadyac, what came to mind to you was a story to do with a tribe, I think from Indonesia, called the Moken. This was something that I first discovered reading your book. Shameless plug.
Yeah.
Reading Freeman's book.
Yeah. Well, it struck me as well. So the story is this. The Moken are a tribe. Indeed, they live on islands off the coast of Indonesia. And it's interesting. I first discovered them. It was a 60 Minutes program, actually. After the tsunami, the 60 Minutes had gotten the word that none of the Moken had died. And of course, they were in the path of the tsunami. They actually were hit first and technically hit harder on these little islands. So they went with this French anthropologist out to speak with the Mokens, and it was fascinating. I love the part of the interview they thought was going to be like, so how did these guys survive?
This is 60 Minutes?
Yeah, 60
interviewing
minutes.
the Mokens?
Yeah, yeah. And
Mike Wallace?
I don't remember which one of them did it, but anyhow, the crux of it was the big impact was, how come you survived? And the answer was so simplistic. Because we saw the animals go to higher ground, and so did we. Now, there's also something in their oral tradition about when the sea goes calm and so forth and so on. So they had other indicators, but they were paying attention to their natural environment, which is ultimately what it spoke of. But that wasn't what struck me as so profound. There was a couple things, and very simple things. The interviewer asked through the interpreter how old the guy was. They were talking to this fisherman guy. And the guy's like, I don't know. He doesn't know how old he is because they don't have a word for that. They don't measure time. They don't even have a word for when, which I thought, wow, wait a minute, what's that about? And there were so many threads that sort of blew open, my personal paradigm of how the world works, right? They didn't like possessions because that weighed you down. They're kind of nomadic. They go between these islands and they build a hut, they leave it. And they make tools, they leave them. And they don't want to carry it because it weighs you down. And there were so many things that were powerful. But one of the things that was most powerful, the interviewer asked, he said, so the Burmese government has taken, it's a military dictatorship, and has taken over a few of these islands. Are you worried? And the interviewer sat there for a minute and goes, that's another thing they don't have a word for. And I went, wow. So what that spoke to in me is that, and this is, I think, a big part of the I Am movie, is that we are sort of socialized and conditioned to believe that competitive is good and so forth and so on, that we're even wired that way, the tale of the Darwinian tale of survival of the fittest and so forth. And what the scientists, there was one specific study was showing that no, in fact, we are far more wired to be cooperative. In terms of wiring, it's just conditioning that we've bought in this idea that we ought to be competitive. And I thought that was powerful. So the two link in this sense, in that, both of them kind of blow open my personal box. Both of them have allowed me more permission to ask myself, what are the qualities in me that I want to generate? And what are the things that I have bought into about, how the world works and what I ought to be doing and even what's possible that I'm no longer that vested in. And so this is the point of both of these. I mean, I Am is a beautiful movie that's, I think, for a lot of people, mind-opening. And for me, it's reaffirming of the idea of what we were talking about in the segment, which is, we have the power to dream a different dream.
I remember in my high school algebra days, these equations, they used to be bracketed, remember, in parentheses?
Oh, yeah. Sure.
And
you have two sides and the whole thing. Yeah.
There is a world of equation inside of those parens. And so I see it I see this story that you're referring to about the Moken. Tom's movie I Am as pushing out the parentheses,
Yes.
pushing out,
That's
it's
beautiful.
expanding the context so that I can reframe how I hold myself vis-a-vis my assumptions about things. And, you and I on this show have referred to humility in a way that maybe is not it's not commonly used. We've talked about humility as it is the talent, the gift, the grace, the skill of being able to hold the possibility that even though things have always been one way, in the very, very next instant it can all be different. That means that the parentheses get blown out, and I have the humility to have a sense of awe and wonder and curiosity, and to allow my tightly held convictions and assumptions. We're so tightly wound.
Yeah, no, that's exactly how I experience it too. It's a loosening of the boundaries and the bindings of my conditioning, of even my perception. You spoke earlier about the developmental stages, and I know we've talked a lot about that, but it's worth noting again and again and again that, look, it's not like, before we knew something, the idea that we ought to have known it is preposterous, that it's all developmental, and these points that we get to. And look, for Tom, it was an accident, a near-death experience. We, on this show, have had so many people who've had near-death experiences and went, oh, my goodness. I in that moment, I had this recognition that they actually were able to see more completely that the track they were on may not be the most fulfilling. And they had this new ordering, if you will, of what their priorities were. And their world, as it were, opened up from the bound state, from the constricted state of how we're taught to hold our reality.
How about that?
It's a chirp.
How about that?
Someone forgot to turn off their devices.
Who could that be?
Who's calling at this
That's
moment?
for me.
Oh, that was beautiful.
That's for me.
I
love that.
Little chirp in the middle
chirping.
of our...
We're just keeping it real.
You have to pay extra for the chirping sound effects.
Like to keep it real. Should I take the call?
Yeah, no. We need another guest.
We could probably patch him in.
Oh.
I didn't hear a word you said. No, I'm only kidding. Let me just text and take this call here. So,
which is so apropos for how we get distracted.
Well, it is apropos. This, what you're talking about is a maturing, a growth, a seasoning. It's just bringing on more capacity. And, as we kid about the texting, it's not a laughing matter, but it is a developmental stage. It is a developmental aspect of us that's in arrested development when you see it in adults. That is so
distracted.
So distracted and so narrowly focused that they are able to, listen, I'm not going to say that I've never done that either, that they're able to think that they can drive a car and take a call, or drive a car and check an email simultaneously. Doesn't make somebody bad or wrong. It's real easy to get all that scolding energy. But it is you push out the ellipses a little bit and begin to realize who we really are in relationship to each other and to everything that it is. And it suddenly becomes it becomes unthinkable. Not that it's bad, it just becomes unthinkable that one would do anything other than be focused with an inspired focused on whatever we're doing.
Right. Fully present.
Fully present with whatever we're doing, and then comes the dawning intelligence
That's right.
That when we are fully present with what we're doing, things begin to expand and become more and more responsive. And on the other side, when we become less fully present, the world gets dangerous.
It does.
It begins to mirror back a sense of being fragmented and disconnected with the self. Accidents happen. Calamities happen.
No, and this is such a great point. I mean, it's interesting. I'm going to throw in the paradox, if you will, that part of the slowing down and the focusing and the grounding and the centering and becoming present, it opens up a very rich complexity. So the distracted complexity is not complexity at all. It's a fragmenting. And yet, on the other side, the going deeply into something and seeing it very dimensionally. Anything, whether it's something in nature or seeing circumstances or watching the world play out in front of us with a level of intimacy of all the threads that are being expressed, that is a kind of movement towards it's a life force energy. There's a dimensionality to it. We've spoken about it. But again, if I sort of tie this whole show together from start to finish with the very beginning of how are you and having Tom on and watching all these threads of how he came to discover and how we're discovering and uncovering and being discovered by these lives we've chose to lead.
We are
choice.
So multidimensional and so complex. It's almost as, another metaphor I have for it is a diamond with many facets. And we get lost in the facet. And it's only when we pull back we see that these are all facets on one jewel. Tom spoke earlier. He said, how are you? And he likes to put the stress on the second syllable, I think. How are you? And that was beautiful. You could put the stress on any of those three words and have three completely different subtexts
that's
going
the beauty
on.
of it. That's
and
absolutely right on.
Our opportunity, as we become more and more lit and more conscious, is to become aware.
That's it.
Of the subtexts of things and to be the chooser of them.
That's the choice. It's the chooser piece.
So when somebody says, how are you? I can have a sensing of where they are coming from. To continue the analogy, depending on what their inflection is, but I can also choose how I decide to relate to that by supplying the subtext myself. I can put the stress on any one of those three words and make that real for me.
Yeah, and I want to say then, very simply, going back to the distraction, it's not that I'm never distracted. I just choose not to live my life always being distracted. So that I get distracted, that I multitask, that I hear from parts of myself and I wander down a road that may or may not be that constructive, of course. But my point of choice is the awareness and going, and being able to sort of pull it back a little bit, see the complexity of it, and then navigate that from a greater sense of awareness, which in fact is what that movie is ultimately all about.
Beautifully said. And speaking of awareness, I am aware that we have run out of time, have we not? I'm seeing our crack engineers all nodding. No, now I'm getting stretch it out 30 seconds. So Freeman is going to sing. He's going to sing a song.
No, I'm really not. Let's give folks the website. Listen, if you've enjoyed this show, we invite you to send it off to folks. That's in fact how the show is disseminated. Though it's on broadcast radio, it also goes out in a viral sense through the internet. So we are really grateful when you share this. We also like to be liked. Please join us on Facebook, and of course, we invite you to keep coming back to Cutting Edge Consciousness. Yeah.
Tom Shadyack's movie, I Am.
Oh, we highly recommend that.
We highly recommend that. So please, you can look at that at the Tom Shadyack's site, www.iam.com, I guess.
I Am the movie, I think. It's also available for instant download at Amazon and other places.
TV. You'll find it. Google it. You'll have no problem finding it. You'll have no problem whatsoever. We wish you a fabulous day and see you next week. here on
Cutting Edge Consciousness.